The next day, Wednesday, Polly made up her mind that she was going to be friendly if it killed her. There was no way anybody was going to make her say anything mean and start croaking again. The first person she met as she walked into the playground was Olivia Heidecker. As Polly came towards her, Olivia started to walk away. "I like that dress you're wearing, Olivia," said Polly. "Them ruffles at the shoulders are real pretty. Did you sew it up all by yourself?" "Listen, Polly Kim, just because I can sew better than—" And then a strange expression appeared on Olivia's face. What did you say?" "I said I liked your dress." "You matched the pattern at the seams just right. There's not a lot of people that can do that." "Why, this old thing?" Olivia spread the skirt for Polly's inspection. "Shucks, it didn't take long to stitch together. It was real nice of you to admire, though." Polly walked on, leaving Olivia shaking her head in puzzlement. Those were the first kind words Olivia had ever heard Polly say. What could have gotten into her anyway? Even Charlie Peabody and Alfred Dawes couldn't get Polly's goat. They had taken over the swings again and weren't about to let somebody else have a chance. "I bet you'd like to swing right now, Polly," sneered Alfred as he swooped down towards her. "But Charlie and me ain't moving for you, nor nobody else." "Fair is fair, Alfred," Polly told him. "You were here first, so I reckon you can swing as long as you'd like." She continued on towards the seesaw, leaving two very surprised boys behind her. Polly made it a point to say something nice to each of the students in Miss Marasco's class that morning, and by noon, the whole room was abuzz. All the boys and girls wondering what had come over Polly Kemp. On the playground at noon, Addie Cardiff and Karen Shea asked Polly to join their game of jacks, and Jadis Proctor wondered if Polly'd help her learn long division. Only Agatha Benthorn and Eunice Ingersoll kept their distance. All that day they waited for the croaking to start, but it never did. As Polly walked home with the Wickstaff twins after school, it came to her mind that never in her life had she had such a wonderful day, but she couldn't help wondering whether she'd be able to keep her tongue in check at Agatha's house tomorrow. The next morning, Polly got up early and spent a long time getting herself ready before coming downstairs. "Why, Polly," her mother said as she sat down at the table, "you're all dressed up in your Sunday best. Are you sure you want to wear that to school?" "It's not just for school, Mother," Polly replied. "Miss Agatha Benthorn invited me to her house today for a party." She made a little curtsy. "Oh, is the whole class going?" "No, just me and Eunice Ingersoll." Snorted Mrs. Kemp. She'd had her own opinions about Agatha and Eunice. That morning at school, Eunice and Agatha sought Polly out first thing. "We hope you haven't forgotten our invitation," said Agatha. "No, I'll be there." But Polly was thinking about how Agatha had said our invitation, like she and Eunice were Siamese twins or something, and one of them couldn't do anything without the other. Twice that morning, and once more in the afternoon, Polly caught the two with their heads together, pointing at her when they thought she wasn't looking and hee-heeing like a pair of hyenas. After school, the three of them bought little cookies at Stew Meat's store, and then off they went to the Benthorn house. Mrs. Benthorn, who had a face that put Polly in the mind of a Holstein cow, met them at the door. The woman looked down at Polly the way she might examine a fly that had lit in her dish of ice cream. Why, Polly Kemp," she said, and her lips pursed distastefully, as if she bit into a green persimmon. "I didn't expect you to want to come here after... Polly wanted to say something about it being bad manners to treat a guest like something the cat dragged in, but she swallowed her pride. Her face was all innocence as she answered Mrs. Benthorn. "Ma'am, I know I tore Agatha's dress, and that it was a mean, spiteful thing to do, and I apologize for it. I hope I haven't put you to too much trouble on account of it. If there's anything I can do to make good, I'm in your debt." It was a pretty little speech, and Mrs. Benthorn listened to it dumbfounded. She'd expected something far different from the sharp-tongued Polly Kemp. No, Polly," she said with some confusion. "It's quite all right. A few minutes with a needle and thread, and it was all mended. Come in, please." Polly stepped into the house, and behind her she could hear Agatha and Eunice whispering. "I never saw Polly act so nice and polite." Agatha sounded a bit worried. "What could have come over her?" added Eunice. They went into the kitchen, and the three girls took seats at the big table. Mrs. Benthorn put the kettle on to boil and set the cookies on a plate. Soon the tea was ready. Polly took a sip. It was boiling hot. She rubbed at her mouth. Don't you like the tea, Polly? Agatha simpered. It's called oolong, and it comes all the way from China. It's fearfully expensive. It's just fine, Polly replied. It's a lot like the kind my mother makes, only hers is stronger. Oh, my dear girl, said Agatha. Surely you can't compare your mother's tea with this costly type. But then, perhaps only a real lady knows how to savor not only the delicate aroma, but the exquisite taste. Wouldn't you agree, Eunice, dear? Polly managed a thin smile. I'm sure you're right, Agatha, she said. I haven't had much practice at being a real lady, but I'm hoping you two can teach me how to do it. Agatha and Eunice looked at one another in consternation. The whole purpose of inviting Polly was to get her riled, so she'd look like a fool and they could laugh at her. With luck, she'd even start jug-a-rumming, the way she did in school. But Polly was being all cool and calm and polite. Agatha decided to try again. I love your new dress, Eunice dear, she said grandly. All that lace, it's quite the style this year. Of course, some people have no sense of style at all, and here she stared at Polly. It was like water rolling off a duck's back. I would so like to be stylish, Polly said, but my mother makes my clothes, and she's too busy to keep up with the latest fashions. But you do look beautiful, Eunice. Neither girl knew what to say. Agatha couldn't criticize Polly's remark without insulting Eunice, and Eunice rather enjoyed the compliment. What do you usually do after school, Polly? Agatha asked, and then she winked her eye at Eunice. I usually play down by Spider Creek, Polly replied, with the whisk staffs. There's a little pool that's filled with tadpoles every spring, and as the days go by, you can see legs starting growing out of them, and then they turn into frogs. I like watching them change. Agatha made a face. Ugh, tadpoles and frogs are horrid things. And so are Leland and Lenora Wickstaff, Eunice added. Well, there are flowers along the creek, too, and there's a jump in the pulpit and Queen Anne's lace, and we have our flowers sent in from a florist, Eunice said, with a toss of her hand. Uh-huh. Polly fought back the urge to say what was on her mind. And what do you two do? After you've had your tea and cookies, I mean. We do needlepoint, said Agatha. And we practice our languages, said Eunice. I can speak French rather well. And we look at the magazines to see what the latest fashions will be. And we take our piano lessons. And we do all the things really well-bred girls should do, Agatha concluded. It's just fine, real fine, replied Polly. But don't you ever like to go out and do other things too? Agatha and Eunice looked at another in surprise. Other things? Like what? Well, Polly had to think about this. Why, just last month, Lenora Wickstaff taught me how to tickle up a trout. Have either of you tried to do that? Eunice looked shocked. Tickle a trout? Sure, it's real easy. You lie down at the edge of the water, right where some big trout is hiding. You get right down on your belly. Both girls wrinkled their noses at the word belly. Then you reach your hand in the water real slow, and you move it just a little at a time until you can feel the fish thinning itself right there in the palm of your hand. And then, whoosh, you grab the trout fast, toss him in the bank, and it's fish for dinner. How awful, moaned Agatha. How gross, groaned Eunice. I think it's fun, said Polly. And Leland has promised to show me how he throws a baseball so it curves right in midair. Now that is something to know. A real lady doesn't catch fish, said Agatha positively. And a real lady doesn't play baseball, Eunice said the word as if the game were some kind of disease. Polly stared at those two girls as if she was seeing them for the first time. She recalled the months and years she had given anything to get an invitation to Agatha's house, and now here she was, and wasn't at all the pleasant thing she expected. It was boring, that's what it was. All that time wasted, time when she could have been making lots of real friends, and not trying to cozy up to these two frilly doll-like creatures who wanted no part of her. Olivia Heindecker, now she'd be a friend if Polly didn't scare her off half the time with her sharp tongue, and Janice Proctor, who'd enjoy seeing the fairy ring of toadstools in the woods, and Karen Shea, who could shoot a slingshot straighter than any boy, and Charlie Peabody and Alfred Dawes, if she'd given him half the chance. And suddenly Polly wanted to go home, or be down by the creek, or walking through town, or almost anywhere except for sitting at the table in the Benthorn kitchen with the two priggish girls who had thought they were being real ladies, when they were really the world's worst snobs. Polly got to her feet. I think I'll be leaving now, she said. But you can't go, cried Agatha. Not until I can go whenever I want to. The time was, Agatha, when I'd have crawled in this house on hands and knees if I thought you'd invite me inside, but that time is over. I'm my own person now. So I bid you ladies, goodbye. With that, Polly marched to the front door where Mrs. Benthorn was standing. Goodbye, Polly, she said. Please come again. I do thank you for your hospitality, ma'am, but I don't think I'll be coming back. But why not? Didn't you have a good time today? It was interesting. I guess both Agatha and Eunice consider themselves to be real proper ladies, but I must say, Miss Benthorn, I hope I never get to be that kind of lady. And before the woman could reply, Polly was out the door. She ran and ran until she was deep in the woods, beyond Spider Creek, and then she looked around until she spotted a big hollow tree. She put her mouth to the opening in its side and began yelling as loud as she could. Agatha Benthorn, Eunice Ingersoll, you two ain't got the brains you was born with. There's a whole world out there just waiting to be looked at and used. And all the two of you want to do is look at pictures and magazines and drink tea and eat little cookies? Ladies, you two ain't ladies. You are poor, wretched things, and the lowliest animal in the woods has got more life in it than you'll ever have. You are the Jug-a-rum. And now she was stuck for a spell, only able to croak like a frog. In spite of that, Polly felt happier than she felt in a long time. She threw a stone in Spider Creek just for the pleasure of hearing the plunk in the water, and then she climbed high in the willow tree and looked off towards the Benthorn house in the distance. Agatha and Eunice were in the front yard. To Polly, they looked about the size of a pair of ants. I don't need those two anymore, Polly thought. I'm free. From her high perch, she shouted with joy. After supper, though, Polly didn't feel quite so happy. Her ma had gone into town for some thread, for the store was open late. Polly sat on the front steps with her hands propping up on her chin. Looks like I'll be saying nothing but nice things from now on, she told herself mournfully. But knowing me, I'll bust out with something blunt and mean at the wrong time. Oh, what's it going to take from now on, having people laugh at me when I start sounding like a swamp critter? Concern that old Thaddeus Blinn anyway. That fat little warthog should have known better than to let me have that wish. He's so Jug-a-rum. There was answering croaks from several frogs along the creek. Polly was thankful there was nobody else around to hear. She was stuck, good and proper. One wish, that's all Thaddeus Blinn had given to each who sat in his tent. Polly wondered if the story she'd heard about Rowena Jervis talking to a bunch of trees had anything to do with the wishing, if there was any way out of the predicament. It'd take somebody smarter than Polly herself to find it. But where was there anyone with enough Yankee cleverness and common sense to? And then came a little gasp from Polly's lips. Perhaps there was a way after all, if only. Quickly, Polly got to her feet. She started at the walk, but her feet moved faster and faster, and soon she was running as fast as she could, running towards the lights of Coventry, where the lights of Coventry were blinking on in the twilight.